Hello there. We are going to do the second part of the 1.08 lesson, the Middle and the Southern Colonies. And we left off here on page 62 with the Restoration Colonies. Yet another dramatic turn of events in England led to the founding of more colonies in North America, New York, New Jersey, and the Carolinas and Pennsylvania. By 1649, Puritans in England had won the Civil War and beheaded Charles I. But the Puritan Commonwealth lasted little more than a decade. The English got fed up with Oliver Cromwell's military dictatorship and his severe Puritan ways. When they died, they started to restore the monarchy, and that was called the Restoration. The new king was Charles II, son of the executed Charles I and a champion of the Church of England. Like his father, he used North American land to reward his friends and get rid of his critics. And here's just a map of the settlement, and you can see the pinkish are the British settlements, the purplish are French, the green are the Dutch areas, and the tan, well, that brown is Spanish, and then the tan is just an area that's not really set up for settlement yet. Okay, continue the next. Who were the critics? Puritans, of course, and a new religious group, the Quakers. To the Quakers, all human beings were equal. They believed that royalty and aristocracy meant nothing in God's eyes and should mean little to men. Not surprisingly, Charles II didn't agree. Surprise! The king didn't agree that monarchy shouldn't matter. Charles II had plans for strengthening the British Empire. His father had watched with dismay when in 1624 a Dutch company set up a colony in an area claimed by Britain. The Dutch called their colony New Netherland. At the time, Charles I was so busy with civil war and unrest in England, he did not oppose the Dutch claim. New Amsterdam, the capital of New Netherland, had the finest harbor on the Atlantic coast. It grew into a busy port town on the island of Manhattan. Okay, Manhattan. What do you think this colony would later be called? Ding, ding, ding. If you guessed New York, you are correct. New Netherland would later become New York. New Amsterdam is the capital of that New Netherland at the time. All right. Just as they did at home in Holland, the Dutch in New Netherland permitted religious dissenters of all sorts. Added to the mix were Scandinavians, Germans, Belgians, both free and enslaved Africans. As New Amsterdam grew, England envied Dutch success in what they believed should be their colony. Charles II decided to take action. Without a shot being fired, England took charge. Charles II handed over the Dutch colony as a gift to his brother, the Duke of York. New Netherland became the English colony of New York, and New Amsterdam became New York City. The grand old Duke of York never visited his colony. He ruled from England until New York residents clamored for a voice in the government. They insisted on a legislature with elected members, and the Duke reluctantly gave in. New York retained its unique cosmopolitan character with ongoing immigration from Belgium, France, Scandinavia, and especially Germany. To protect and promote trade, England passed a series of laws called the Navigation Acts. In New York, the colony's shipbuilding and the construction trades exploded as new laws allowed English merchants to take full advantage of New York's thriving trade. Artisans built wharves, warehouses, and merchants' homes. And it just goes on talking more about trade. In 1644, the Duke of York carved New Jersey out of land between the Hudson and Delaware rivers and gave it to two English noblemen. The noblemen sold it to English Quakers and Scots proprietors to divide it into West Jersey and East Jersey. The Quakers settled in West Jersey, where they had been promised religious toleration. A mix of Puritans, Dutch farmers, and newly arrived Scots immigrants populated East Jersey. In 1702, the two Jerseys were combined into one royal colony, New Jersey. The Carolinas. Charles II passed out land grants like party favors. I like that analogy. In the 1670s, he presented a group of English landholders with an enormous area that included modern-day North and South Carolina and Georgia. The colony was named Carolina to honor the king. After landing on a peninsula between the mouths of the Ashley and Cooper Rivers in present-day South Carolina, the planters founded Charlestown, later called Charleston, also named after their royal benefactor. These gentlemen planters already owned plantations in the West Indies. They were accustomed to using both enslaved Africans and indentured servants as laborers. The planters shipped both slaves and servants from the West Indies to the Carolinas. At least a third of Carolina's early English settlers were indentured servants. Typically, they worked for 5 years and then received 100 acres of free land. Their freedom dues, items they were given when their indenture ended, often include a set of clothes, a barrel of corn, an axe, and a hoe. They cut pine trees for lumber and boiled the resin to make tar for caulking ships. With the help of slave labor, Carolina became the largest colonial producer of tar. Selling the tar was fine for freed servants, but Carolina planters wanted a more profitable business. Slaves who had grown up on swampy areas on the west coast of Africa already knew how to raise rice. The planters learned from them how to grow rice in the hot, marshy lowlands of Carolina. Soon the rice trade flourished. So we have rice and tar becoming two profitable enterprises coming out of the Carolina area. And here is just a primary source document, Observations of New Amsterdam, and we're just going to skip over that at this time. Pennsylvania, the last of the Restoration colonies, with a gift from King Charles to 36-year-old William Penn. Penn as in Pennsylvania. So guess what land he got? He got Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania became a handy way to pay off a debt and dispose of other troublesome religious dissenters, the Society of Friends, generally known as the Quakers. Quakers earned their nickname because in worship they sometimes tremble violently or quake before God. This new religious group had no respect for social hierarchy. They rejected rank and distinction in society. Or according to Quaker belief, the Spirit of God is present in men and women, Europeans and Africans, royalties and commoners. Another word, every person possesses an inner light, both revealing and leading the worshiper to God. They avoided pomp and ceremony. They wore simple, plain clothing. In contrast to elaborate Anglican church services, they held meetings with no minister presiding, and women could speak as freely as men. They condemned slavery, and they refused to tip their hats in any way to royalty or nobility. On both sides of the Atlantic, Anglicans and Puritans did not like the Quakers. So that is why William Penn was the leader and settled into Pennsylvania as a place to practice the Quaker religion. And that's just kind of the summary of the rest of those paragraphs there. Charles tried to deal with the Quakers by signing over a large parcel of land and naming William Penn as the proprietor. Later, the king's brother, the Duke of York, gave William Penn land that would become the neighboring colony of Delaware. A holy experiment. William Penn enthusiastically embraced what he called the holy experiment. As governor of Pennsylvania, he could propose laws. I lost my place. But an elected assembly had the option of adopting or rejecting them. Most importantly, all faiths were tolerated. No one could be persecuted for their religion. Along with Rhode Island and Maryland, Pennsylvania established itself as a safe haven for dissenters. Perhaps it was the most attractive of all because ample farmland awaited settlers, and Penn tried to make it easy for colonists to purchase farms. Penn himself resettled in the colony for a time where he was known for his fair treatment of the Native Americans. But brotherly love, he delighted in laying out the simple orderly grid of the colony's capital, which he named Philadelphia, meaning the city of brotherly love. But brotherly love did not always prevail in Pennsylvania. Many of the new Quaker colonists were unhappy with their land grants and complained loudly. Penn, like other colonial founders, needed to attract settlers, so he had advertised across Europe for colonists. Pennsylvania settlers soon included not only Englishmen, but also Germans, Swedes, Finns, Dutch, Welsh, and Irish. If William Penn's holy experiment did not succeed in all ways, he still managed to find a colony based on the principle that most Puritans and Anglicans had firmly avoided: freedom of religion. And you can see this is getting to be a pretty ingrained concept in many of these colonial areas, and that's why it would be a strong desire to have that same idea, freedom of religion, be put into the new government when the United States crafted the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. By the time Charles II took the throne in 1660, Britain's North American colonies had become more than a haven for religious dissenters and a home to displaced cavaliers. They were producing wealth for England, not gold but valuable crops and raw materials. It was becoming a profitable colony for England. Okay, so it's just talking about they produced tar and tobacco and rice. And then farther north, they exported lumber, fur, and fish. They sold rye, wheat, and oats. And the port of Boston was a great place to ship these things and became a shipbuilding center and starting of a vast trade network. So it's no longer just a little colony over the ocean. It was becoming very profitable. Okay. And it says that the king tried to enforce the Navigation Acts. One of the acts stated that no foreign ship could deliver goods to the colonies or carry away colonial goods. Another said English colonists could only buy merchandise manufactured in the mother country. Still another Navigation Act required the colonies sell their crops only to English merchants. So you're starting to see they're starting to clamp down a little bit, and why that's going to be a problem with some of the colonies. Okay, the next paragraph, let's try to summarize about the Glorious Revolution. Royal pressure on the colonies increased after Charles II died. The colonists resented the rule of James II, his brother. So did many people in England. He proclaimed he ruled by divine right with the authority of God. And Englishmen had said they had enough. So we're going to read about a coup where William of Orange, the king's Dutch son-in-law, called this the Glorious Revolution to take over the government. In 1689, William signed the English Bill of Rights. And in this, the Bill of Rights emphasized the English monarchs held their power only with Parliament's consent, not by divine right. It was the beginning of a revolutionary era that recognized, as the English philosopher John Locke proclaimed, that it was the natural right of the people to oust a tyrannical ruler. Natural rights of the people to govern would be an important concept in American independence. By the close of the 17th century, England's North American colonies lined the Atlantic seaboard and dotted the Caribbean. The English crown helped create this diversity by leaving it up to private companies and individuals to settle and make the region profitable. The unsettled politics of England also fueled diverse settlement because of religious persecution and setting up places for religious toleration in the New World. Despite the variety of religions, classes, and goals, the colonists held some things in common. They passed their own laws, they set up town governments, they established offices, and they enjoyed substantial autonomy from the crown, that's being able to rule themselves. And they would develop art practices and institutions that were uniquely their own, a colonial system. Competition for the continent, and here is going to talk about the French and Spanish, that is, a competition for area in the new land. And here it talks about New France in the area of Quebec in Canada, and they were mostly settled by French fur traders, and they had very friendly relations with the Native Americans in the area because they were integral to the fur trade. And they're also talking about here New Spain in Central and South America and protecting those areas as well. To protect against intrusions by European rivals in their Central and South American colonies, the Spanish sent missionaries and soldiers to settle the American Southwest, including parts of present-day New Mexico and present-day New Mexico and Arizona. So they weren't, when the